Should now go to China and discuss some of these issues with Dr. Wang Wen. I think some of your articles that you've written for Valdai in the course of this year were very prescient in terms of the posthumous developments on the crisis front. In one of the papers, you've talked about the need for the world to be prepared for the worst in terms of the possibility of a global crisis. You were writing about these issues back in February. And another fascinating theme that you touched upon in your articles was the relative resilience of countries versus companies with regard to crises. And I think that has a lot of interesting facets of discussion that we could pursue today. So my question is, regarding the future that you see of global corporations playing a greater role in the world economy, what will be the shape of the world economy in that case? Is it going to be accompanied by the fragmentation of national economies? And where is China in this future scheme? Clearly, we're seeing more and more mega corporates emerging in China that are becoming major world players. How do you see that dynamic playing out and the role of China in the future? Please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to having me and introduce my articles. Let me introduce myself very briefly. My name is Wang Wen, Executive Dean and Professor of Chongyang Institute for Financial Study, Renmin University of China. Why I want to introduce, because Chongyang, the word comes from the Chongyang Investment, one of the largest private equity funds in China. So its founder, Mr. Qiu Guogen, one of the alumni of the Renmin University of China, has donated nearly $100 million to his alma mater. So he has a very great respect for Mr. Li Dalio. So allow me, as a professor, to pay tribute to Mr. Li Dalio on his behavior. So both of you are all heroes in this era of deglobalization and building a successful companies. So that's why I want to share with my friends that about another pictures of a new story of rise of the international companies in the pandemic period. So first things I want to share with you as a Mr. Chair, you're talking about that nowadays many countries have fallen into the economic recession because of the pandemic. But however, a lot of multinational companies have benefited from it. The market value of most of the top 100 largest companies increased in 2020. And take middle September as an example. Apple's market value was $1.9 trillion, an increase of over 200%, over $900 billion in the end of the last year. So the same for the other big companies. So this growth trend continues. And by contrast, GDP is a different pictures. So except for a few countries such as China, Vietnam, the GDP of more than 170 countries will choose negative growth in 2020. So there is no denying that the greatest human crisis since 1945 has led a K-shaped division of economic growth. Profit have been skyrocketing in financial industry in 5 American technology giants, FAANG, right? Logistics, consumer goods, or online educations. But while the tourism fall by 79% this year, and the luxury goods, entertainment, supports continue to slump. So unfortunately, the country, as we mentioned, as an organization in the lower half of the K-shape. So a new things nowadays we have to think about in the backgrounds of the deglobalization is that the companies may be more resilient in a crisis than countries. In human history, there are at least 3 companies with a history of more than 1,000 years. There are countless companies with hundreds of years of history, and family business with more than 200 years are not few as well. But imagine how many countries have a history of more than 100 years, 1,000 years. So maybe we can count them with our fingers. So the emergence of the companies is later than that of the country, but that vitality of the company is becoming stronger and stronger in the future. This is another pictures. So at present, the market value of the top multinational companies far exceeds the economic scales of the most countries. The market value of top 5 companies in the world can be ranked in the G20, in the top 20 of the national GDP. So the size of about 2/3 of the national economies is less than that of the top 100 global companies. So what's worse, globalization is driving the fragmentation of the countries. In 1945, there were only 51 member states of the United Nations. In 2009, it became 192. So it is estimated that by 2050, there will be 250 countries in the world. Nowadays, in the world, there are about 4,000 ethnic groups, but most of them have no their national state. Right? If we imagine the state as a life, I think that a country has a lifespan. The life expectancy in a Soviet Union is only 69 years. In Yugoslavia, it's only 74 years old. So why I talk about it, I just want to share with you is that another pictures. So nowadays, there are many good companies, but less and less good countries. So compare company with countries is certainly a new topic and a controversial one, but there should be no controversy at all. When the COVID-19 outbreak inspires us to think about the model of the human governance. So history just beginning again, but not end. So my conclusion is that it's very simple. That is, first, nowadays, China's goal is very simple. It's to build a strong country. The foundation of a strong country is a strong and a promising government. Also, it needs a smart leader. So just as a successful company needs a smart boss, Mr. Vidalio knows that very well. And second, the current decline of the countries is fundamentally due to the failure of the government. So the reason nowadays lie in the lack of the intelligent leaders. So this area needs hero leaders. So the company governance model may be able to provide more and more reference for the national governance. So third, the major backgrounds of so-called deglobalization is the decline of the country. But for big companies, globalization is bound to continue. So in the future, which country has a large scales, faster economic growth, and better governance, better cooperating with multinational companies, which country will lead the next round of the globalization? So about China, so I think that China nowadays always keep modest. We keep restrict. So look at the international public opinion. for United States, the U.S. President, President Trump, every day criticize China. But in China side, our top leaders, we keep restrict, we keep silent. Why? Because we think the top things is to solve our domestic issues. Then we look at the long futures, just to keep our countries always living in the crisis, in this big background. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a fascinating perspective indeed. Some might say perhaps somewhat utopian, just as our annual report was meant to be for this annual conference, the Valdai Annual Report. And after all, if you look at today's realities, despite all of the prognostications in the preceding decades, I think that there will be the fall of the national state and the rise of regions, regionalism, or other forms of governance. It seems like today, in today's conditions, the national state reigns supreme. With its realpolitik, with its policy of national interest, etc. But this may be the corporate venue, may be the way forward, even if this is something that is maybe somewhat distant in the future. My additional question with regard to China's role in bolstering globalization going forward is regarding China's middle class and consumption. And of course, in the past years, we've seen a switch in gear in terms of the development of China away from exports and investment towards services, towards consumption. And of course, this is fueled to a significant degree by this buildup in the China's middle class. How do you see this process going forward? Is it sustainable? Is there a way for China's consumer boom, consumer surge to contribute to greater globalization going forward?
Thank you, Chair. Why I will present again, compare the countries and the companies, I just want to share my friends that in the future, the globalization is bound to continue, but the multinational companies, the responsibility is, and the power is very, very big. And about China, the chair mentioned is that China, of course, nowadays has basically controlled the pandemic situations. And China's economic growth in the third quarter was 4.9%, the best in the world. And China will become, this year, will become the world's largest consumer market in 2020. And China is still an opportunity for the world, including for the United States. So I think that I agree. Some people said that nowadays the time are different. I think the great power relations, as Mr. Redadio said right now, but in my opinions, the great power relations has long gone beyond realism, and even nowadays in every forums, every day, every international friend, they will mention about China. But in China, I must think tank scholars. I every week, even maybe every day, I was invited for those consulting insight conference of Chinese government, Chinese ministries. In China, no one talking about, no one discuss how to become the next hegemony of China. No, we never thinking about that, because we know in the future, no one can be the next hegemonic countries. China will not be. On the contrary, as we know, human beings nowadays need to save themselves in the context of a lot of crises, including climate change, including virus illusion. So in such a rescue, so I think the global cooperation become a much more and more important than before. This is my brief answer.